I'm Dr. Swanee Jett, and I've had a passion for public health for over 30 years. And these are the critical conversations about health in our community. Good morning, I'm your host, Dr. Swanee Jett. Welcome to Live CEO Talks. Today we're going to talk about gun violence and what is happening in America. Right now in America, 100 people die per day from gun violence, 60% from suicides, 35% from homicides. We also have an issue with mass shootings as well in this country. So today, I really want to introduce one of my friends, Whitney Alston, and I want her to talk a little bit about what has happened to her in her life and what has set her on a different course. So welcome to the set, Ms. Whitney.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So right now you have the Whitney Strong Foundation. Tell me, why did you start?
Well, I always share I cared about preventing gun violence before it actually impacted me, but in a very narrow sense. So I'm a mother. I have a 9-year-old and an 11-year-old, and I think a lot of parents in America can relate to being concerned about school shootings. I'll never forget being pregnant with my daughter and having my toddler son with me as I spent an entire weekend in December of 2012 watching the footage of the Sandy Hook shooting and thinking that this isn't okay, this isn't the America that I want my children to inherit. But I had a lot of excuses for not getting involved in the work of prevention. I had a busy career, I had young kids, I just came up with every excuse for why I didn't need to get involved in the work. But of course, disrupted story after story every time another mass shooting would occur. And then fast forward to September 6, 2018, I thought I was going into work at Fifth Third Bank like any other day at our corporate headquarters. And instead, I walked into a mass shooting. And as it was happening, simultaneously being shot, thinking about my family and whether I'd ever see them again, thinking about my route for survival, I also thought, how dare you think that this could never happen to you, that you're immune to gun violence, and that you should have done something. You had so many opportunities to do something, but you never did anything. And so once it was confirmed that I would live, that this miraculous outcome was mine, that I had been shot 12 times and none of the bullets hit any major organs or arteries, that I was so stable that I didn't even have to have surgery until the next day. It was the most clear message I have ever received. I'm a person of faith. It was, you have to do something. You have learned, you now have to do something. And so it all goes back to, the way I felt before I was shot, and then of course, the way my life has changed because of being shot.
I'm curious, what were you thinking as you were being shot?
First off, it was a very short period of time. It was exactly 1 minute, 1:00. That is how long I was under fire before the Cincinnati Police Department arrived. Now, to me, it felt like hours and hours. But there were many, many, many thoughts. Like I said, I was simultaneously thinking, first off, what's happening to me? I had never been attacked in a violent way ever, so I thought, I'm not being stabbed, nobody's right next to me. This burning sensation, I must be being shot,
Right.
and this must be a mass shooting, because what other reason would there be for what's happening to
Right.
me? But then very quickly went into, oh my God, I have to live. I have to get back home. I have little children. I have a husband. I have, very important people that rely upon me. I have to get back home. And I thought about different routes of survival, but
Okay.
none of them were any good. I tried to push myself up from the floor. I was stuck in the revolving door, but both of my arms were so badly damaged that I just didn't have the physical strength to pull myself up. I looked out on Fountain Square, and it was totally dead. Nobody was out there, no one to save me. And then I thought, well, I'll call 911. And that's when, after kind of moving my dummy arm over to try to get to the phone, the next barrage of bullets came. And at that point, the most devastating moment, period, I have no options for survival. I am not going to live. I have to play dead if there's any chance of this. And just went inward, said a prayer, and really actually felt a huge amount of peace, because I, as a person of faith, know where I'm going. And so just sat with that, but at the same time thought about my family. And in that 1 minute, CPD arrived, and all of a sudden, no, I'm not dying. I'm going to get back home to my family, and immediately started communicating to the police officer that was closest to me, Officer Al Staples. And he had a very concerned look on his face. He could see everything happening behind me. I couldn't, so I had a lot of courage to just shout out to him and ask him to save me. And while he was communicating with me, so many of the other officers were tracking the shooter, and they were able to shoot and kill him. And as soon as they did that, they could run up and rescue me and pull me out of the revolving door. So back to the question, I thought about, I had to assess what was happening to me. I had to think through all of the options for survival. I had to reckon with death. And then also the thoughts of guilt that I had done nothing to stop gun violence from happening.
Yeah, so, my heart goes out to you and your family. You're very courageous for telling your story. A lot of times when incidents happen, people usually don't want to talk about it. They have to deal with a lot of grief. I asked the question on how you felt at that moment, because I would think anybody would think about their family, think about their kids, and them not growing up, with their mother.
I want to really see the number of people shot each year significantly reduced in a consistent way.
So tell me a little bit about this officer, courageous hero that saved your life.
Yeah, Officer Al Staples is really, really special. He was special before he showed up as my hero on September 6th. He has been a police officer in communities often hit hardest by gun violence for decades. In fact, he's so well recognized, he's in a mural in Over the Rhine in Cincinnati. So he's beloved by the community, beloved by me, because he was the face of a hero to me in that day. And we still keep in touch. He's really someone I see almost every time I go into Cincinnati. He volunteers for Whitney Strong. He comes down to Louisville to participate in events. And we talk about, once he retires, that he'll be involved in a full-time way with Whitney Strong. So
That's good.
He's a really special man.
So what did you do before for Fifth Third Bank? And then, tell me a little bit about the path that you're on now.
So I was a banker, and it was really professionally the only career I ever knew. I loved working at the bank. I started out in the branches, and then I went back to school and got my MBA because I knew I wanted to do more with the bank. And in 2010, transitioned into different corporate roles, working in communications and project management. And the last few years before the shooting, I did product. So I managed all of the unsecured lending portfolio for the bank. So, banking is boring speak to most people, but it was really exciting work. And we had just launched a brand new digital application for one of our loans just a couple of months before the shooting. So that's why I was in Cincinnati all the time. The team was up there, and I was ready to watch it play out and see the results and improve upon the product. And then, sure enough, the shooting happened, and what once mattered so much all of a sudden didn't matter at all. It was, how do I prevent this thing, this awful thing that happened to me, from happening to other people? And not just specifically what happened to me. Mass violence is awful and horrible, but in this new world of work that I do, I have developed many, many relationships with survivors of gun violence and those who have lost loved ones to gun violence. And it became very clear to me, it doesn't matter how you're shot, why you're shot, where you're shot, none of those factors matter. The trauma is impossible, and this thing is preventable. So how can I be on the side of preventing it?
You know, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad somebody saved you, because you have a real purpose in life. Oftentimes, you know, at the beginning of the show, I talked about the statistics, right? But I believe every life counts. So tell me a little bit about your foundation, because you had a great career before. You were making a lot of money, I'm sure. And now you have started a foundation, which is different work. So tell me about it.
Yeah, I don't think I knew what I was getting into. I had a very clear trajectory at Fifth Third, did all of the education necessary to really excel in the world of business, and then, okay, now we're gonna start a nonprofit. And if I'm being honest, I still pursue it much more as a business than a nonprofit, but there are good aspects to both, and trying to do my best to learn and balance them. But to me, it really shouldn't matter if you're a for-profit or a non-for-profit. We all have a responsibility to make our country and our states and our cities and our communities better. So I think it was a natural progression. I really did feel my heartstrings pulled in those years leading up to the shooting that I needed to do more. So with Whitney Strong as a nonprofit, we are focused on primarily pulling people together to make progress on the issue of gun violence. I can remember sitting in the hospital that first week after the surgery, getting blood transfusions, and talking a lot to my husband about how can we make progress on this issue that feels so very stagnant. It's not to be dismissive of all the reasons.
While you're in the hospital, you're thinking this?
Yes.
While you're in the hospital?
Yes.
Because I'm just thinking about surviving. So you're thinking about, what can we do? Wow.
I could check that box that I was going to be okay. That's how good everything was with me physically. Not that things were okay, like I couldn't use my fingers and I needed people to pull my pants off so I could use the restroom, but they had communicated to me as the experts that I was going to be okay. I trusted them, and I knew that I had work in front of me, but that I'd do the work and I'd be okay. So I got this huge blessing. Don't worry about it, do the work, spend your energy on prevention. And my mind has always been overactive. That's part of the corporate grooming, and so I had to think about something, and that's what I thought about. I also had the kids home in Louisville, so I didn't have parenting responsibilities.
Which is big, because you can't think much when you're chasing kids.
If the kids were there, it would have been a totally different situation. And so we thought about the many factors that lead to stagnation on this issue. You know, part of it is cultural, what gun owners think versus non-gun owners. Part of it is political, what Republicans want versus Democrats. And some of it is just a lack of education. You know, gun violence is increasing in terms of its mortality and in terms of being a leading cause of death. And so in many ways, Americans are just like, oh my God, like this is a problem. I do need to pay attention to this now. And so we landed on, if we focus on common ground then we can pull people together, we can make progress, and certainly progress is better than where we are now. And so that was the idea in the hospital. But I wasn't ready for the world really to know about it. There were many requests from national media outlets. I needed a lot of support. Like I said, I couldn't use my fingers, so there was no typing or texting.
How long could you not use your fingers?
It probably took at least a month to 2 months before I could start texting.
Okay.
I had to do everything voice to text, which was
that's painful.
Really gives you empathy for people that need to do that constant. Yes, yes. All kinds of incorrect names. I mean, it just became a joke. Like, I know who you are. I'm sorry that my phone can't, spell your name correctly. And so we headed back home, and many of the support systems in my life, from physical therapy to occupational therapy to mental health therapy, started to come into place. And this amazing team of really friends from business school surrounded me and helped build the website, establish us as a nonprofit, and prepare us to accept donations so that we could fully launch the organization. And we did. It was exactly 3 weeks after the shooting, and jumped on Good Morning America and all those shows to say, this is what happened to me, and this is the positive outcome of what happened. So that's how it all got started.
So measure success, and what does that look like?
Yeah, so.
Because I know you're a numbers person, so I know you've thought about this.
So to me, there are more than two sides to this coin, but I often say Whitney Strong as an organization is doing very well in terms of the support we have from individuals, the engagement from those individuals, the support we have from foundations. Like, that growth trajectory is very, very strong. But to me, none of that matters until we see the number of people that are shot each year decreasing in a significant and consistent way. And we have seen the exact opposite in the last 2 years because of a number of factors, the most significant of which is COVID-19 and what it has done to our mental health state, to the social services that we provide. Could go on and on and on. And so that pains me greatly. But I have to remind myself that Whitney Strong is not executing every solution that can prevent gun violence. We are doing the ones that we can do well. There are many other organizations that are doing what they can do well, and we all work together. So I don't know that I'll be satisfied for decades, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to change my goals. I want to really see the number of people shot each year significantly reduced in a consistent way so that we can look back and say, wow, in 2000 and maybe it's 2022 is when we started to see the dip in these incidents, and that it continues in a consistent way.
Yeah, I think the last time I saw the data on mass shootings, it was 611 in 2020. I haven't seen the 2021 data yet.
Yeah, well, first off, everybody has to agree upon their data, right? Like, what quantifies a mass shooting? I have my own opinion. A lot of them exclude me. Like, you don't count because you lived. We're only counting the number of people who died. I don't think that's the right definition.
So I did see some data that did include how many people were injured and how many people that died.
Yeah, I think that's a better measure.
Of course, I don't like looking at the numbers, so I stopped pulling the faces and the people. Texas was the last one that I looked at because it impacted kids.
Yeah. Well, regardless of how you measure it, the FBI has their own measurement of what an active shooting is, and they released a report recently that showed in 2000 there were 3 active shooter incidents, and in 2020 there were 40. And you can look at that regardless of your definition of a mass shooting. We have seen a significant increase in the last 2 decades. And so, again, it doesn't matter what definition you use, this is a growing problem for America. It's still a small number of people each year, and why we should not take our eyes off of solutions that can reduce homicide, domestic violence, community violence, accidents with our kids, suicide by firearm. But it is a growing problem, and what I think is, even though it is a small number of people impacted, it has an outsized impact on our mental health.
Correct.
Because we're worried about our kids at school. We're worried about groceries. I can't tell you how many people tell me they don't go to movie theaters anymore because they're worried about a mass shooting happening in a theater. And we do have tools to make this better, but we're not using them. Not yet. Not in a consistent and significant way.
So talk about the advocacy work that you're doing.
Yeah, so at Whitney Strong, we have chosen 3 areas to focus on to help prevent gun violence, and all very purposeful. One is a short-term strategy, which is educating as many people as possible on what they can do now to make their communities safer. And right now that's heavily focused in our West End and in the neighborhoods in Cincinnati that see the highest levels of homicide. But these trainings include what does it mean to be a responsible gun owner? How do we better recognize the warnings of suicide in our communities? And how do we react if the worst of the worst happens with Stop the Bleed training?
Correct.
And so I love that work because it brings me face to face with humans, and we can all do better. We can all do better, whether that's learning how to apply a tourniquet, being aware of those who may have suicidal thoughts around us, or even safely storing when we weren't safely storing before. So I love that work, and Whitney Strong will continue to bring it into more communities. My next goal is to get it into the communities with higher levels of suicide, because as you started, when you look at gun deaths in total, more people are dying to suicide by firearm than any others. And so that's one area of focus. A second area of focus is research. I know we have had a deficit of research on this subject matter for decades because of lack of federal funding. In 2019, Congress finally came together after decades and allocated $25 million to the CDC and the NIH. We got a lot to make up for. And until we make up for it, it really plays into the narrative that, well, we don't know what we're doing in the first place. Nobody knows how to solve this problem. So we will continue to fund research projects that support the work that we do. And so just to give you an example, we're working with the University of Cincinnati's criminology department to improve our outcomes from our community Save a Life work so that we can really point toward these are the ways in which behaviors are changing. These are the ways in which lives are being saved. And then lastly is the advocacy part of the job, and that's focused on legislation. And so in Kentucky, we have a bill called Crisis Aversion and Rights Retention, and it is a helping tool. It's to help gun owners. Gun owners can have crisis moments too, whether it's self-harm and suicide or planning an incident of mass violence. And with CAR, we would have a legal path to temporarily transfer the firearm away from their home during this period of time and then get them the help that they need so that they can get back to a place in which gun ownership is safe. So this is not a permanent transfer, this is a temporary transfer, and it's really meant to help gun owners. So we're working on that in Kentucky, and we have bipartisan support, which is a guiding principle for our organization. We will never pursue a bill unless we have a Republican and a Democrat leading the charge.
All together good.
And so as we head into 2023 session, we'll be working with Senator Westerfield out of Hopkinsville and others. And then the last part of that, which is just the most exciting piece for me, it was a fill my bucket moment. We really believe in bipartisan work. We believe that that is the path
That's
to
the path.
progress
Yes,
on
it
this
is.
issue. And so in June, our team was in DC for 2 weeks because of a bunch of factors. We had the horrific mass shooting in Buffalo, followed by the horrific mass shooting in Uvalde. It was the right time. So much of what happens in politics is timing, and it was the right time for those in DC to finally do something. And so we were spending time lobbying Senator McConnell, working on staff with Senator Portman, and many, many other senators up in DC. And it happened. It passed. It was unbelievable to me at the time. I thought that I was being punked at all moments. Like, is this really happening? Are we actually going to pass a bill to help prevent gun violence? And we did. And not only did we, the full, well, not the full, but a lot of the Whitney Strong team, including my family and my children, got to sit in the Senate gallery and watch all of the votes cast. And I'm just so very grateful. I think that so many senators on that day elevated to the highest versions of themselves, including Senator Cornyn out of Texas, Senator Murphy out of Connecticut, Senator McConnell out of Kentucky. It was just a tremendous moment for the movement. And so to everybody in Frankfurt, I say, watch out. Like, I witnessed it. This can happen. And so I already was not going to give up. Now I'm never going to give up. We're going to get there. We are going to make change in Frankfurt too.
Well, thank you. So on a final note, that concludes our show today. I want to thank Ms. Whitney Alston for coming. I want to let her know we are Park Duval in advocacy work too. So we do have grief counselors on staff. We do provide mental health services. I want to be an aid to your foundation. And thank you for coming. It was a pleasure.
Oh, well, thank you.
And remember to dedicate yourself to a mission or a cause that will outlast you.